A provocative decision for body cameras for the Providence Police, and the chief is here to talk about it.
The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Good Thursday evening to you. Chief Hugh Clements is here from the Providence Police Department. I'm pleased and honored to have him. There's a big pile of taxpayer money that's going toward hundreds of police body cameras, and boy, that's a conversation that America is in the middle of right now, given what's happened in Tulsa, in Charlotte, and everywhere. And you know, without those incidents, this conversation has been in motion for quite some time. It's got some debate, of course, and we'll talk about all the debate points as we go with the chief. Program note, if you're watching this for the original program on Thursday night, and welcome in for this Thursday evening, I know that there's a big accident in New Jersey with the train. Some of the other contemporary issues of the day. We're going to pass on that because most likely we'll be replaying this conversation a couple of times over the next couple of weeks. So an FYI program note. In the meantime, no further ado, here's Eyewitness News discussion of this new grant.
Providence's police chief, Colonel Hugh Clements, is confident the PD will be able to put together the money for a full body camera program, perhaps in the next few months. He says up to 250 officers will wear the cameras, and the department will have unlimited cloud storage for the video.
We know body-worn cameras have been effective in improving community relations, in trust, transparency. They've also been effective in reducing crime.
Clements says the pilot program with 10 officers over the summer went well. The ACLU of Rhode Island, however, takes issue with the camera policy, saying in a statement today, the policy we understand is currently in use by the Providence Police Department will serve only to shroud body camera footage in secrecy and raise serious questions as to the discretion used by law enforcement in activating the cameras. We obtained that policy, which says officers do turn on the cameras manually. They'll be required to turn them on during interactions ranging from vehicle pursuits to anything involving force. The ACLU is also concerned about whether the video will be available to the public.
Our mindset is to be transparent and to allow people to view the videos.
Colonel Clements says the video will be subject to open records law and will be released by the police department on a case-by-case basis.
All right. Good to have you, Chief. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Dan. Pleasure to be here.
This is good news.
This is good news and a very important topic in American policing today.
Yeah, I would imagine, not that you're a cagey old veteran, but you've been around for a while and you've seen the evolution of all sorts of police technology, right? Perhaps not so much social conversation tied to some of the technology that you've seen and the growth of you know, the bells and whistles that you've had to implement over the course of time. Meaning, this is one of those things that people have excitement over and a lot of worry over at the same time.
Correct. Certainly American policing is on the top of everyone's conversation list, and I think in policing, certainly in Providence and many progressive departments around the country, we strive for perfection. And in this particular case, we should embrace technology, not fear it. And in this case, it's an added tool for a police officer to have this at his disposal. We firmly believe it's the wave of the future. It will be mandated in a very short time for police departments around the country, and that's why we've embraced it so early. And there will be tweaks and transitions with this technology, but we believe it will allow the Providence Police and police departments who employ the body-worn cameras to provide a better police service, to gain that trust from the community. In the end, it's about service to the public. And what does every community, what does every neighborhood want from their police department? They want fair and effective policing, and they want their police department to be accountable, and they want trust. Without trust, you can't effectively police.
All right, let's get into the boring stuff for a second. So hang in, we'll talk about some of the more provocative issues here. The mechanics of this financially. I mean, you got a $375,000 federal grant, correct?
Correct.
That's a big nut comparative to all of the monies that were issued. You got a big chunk of change. Obviously, it's a big police department, but it's a pretty good nut.
We did well. There were 4 categories. We were awarded in the large agency category. There were 492 municipalities that applied. 179 were awarded. we received in the category of a large police agency, and we did well, $375,000 on the Department of Justice.
And that pays for what?
That pays for soup to nuts with the program that we decide to select. We did a pilot program with 2 companies, Taser and Vivio, and so that would pay for, in essence, it's just under, we believe, $1 million for a 3-year program, soup to nuts, for the equipment, for the training, for the cloud storage. So the 375 will probably pay for 1 year. But we need the 50% matching on the city side, and that funding stream has yet to be identified. We're confident we do that in a short amount of time.
Is it like most of the federal grant programs that it's just a delineating, matching? In other words, eventually this will have to be self-sustaining on the part of the city?
Yes, and the grant monies are available from October 2016 to September of 18.
It's always interesting because, you know, I remember the COPS program back in Bill Clinton's day when a huge amount of federal money came into to communities to add police. But the catch was you got 2, 3, 4 years to figure it out on your own, because if you don't, you're not going to have the dough.
Same here.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're confident, though, that there's enough budget. We're constantly talking about, you know, financial deficiencies and deficits and all that kind of thing.
We're confident that we will find the monies on the city side, whether that be from private resources or city resources.
Would it have happened without the grant?
I don't think so.
So the grant's the jump start?
We applied for the grant with high hopes that we would attain it, and we have. So we're confident that we will find the monies to match 50-50.
All right. Anything other on a logistics basis, technicalities with the federal grant, the stuff of government-ese that people should know about?
No.
So it's pretty,
pretty
basic.
We've really paid attention to what's going on elsewhere in the country in larger cities like New York, Phoenix, Miami, Oakland, and we've replicated their research around this, their policies around this, and how they've rolled out the format of body-worn cameras.
All right, so I'm guessing this was something that evolved over time. Who or how many folks are involved in the decision-making to make the move on this, to make the application? Is there some inertia? Is it the City Hall? Is it you? Is it the union? Is it the community? What caused this to be, it's time, let's apply, let's get this thing going?
You know, we police truly in a very community-oriented approach, so it's many entities. We have a police advisory board, so certainly from the mayor's office, the commissioner, me as the chief of police and the police department command staff, we fully believe in providing the best police services we can. So it came from many different entities, including the community. And as well, we had at the table many stakeholders involved in this decision-making process, even when we got to crafting and developing policy. Certainly, Police Advisory Board, community groups, NAACP, Public Defender's Office, ACLU, and we just deal with so many community groups on a daily basis.
When let's pause here. When we come back, we'll talk about how this thing works, and then of course we'll talk about some of the challenges some other cities have had and what Providence learns from it. Stay with us. Welcome back. The headline amongst many: Providence Police Chief lays out body cameras plan. ACLU raises concerns. You know, we can have the ACLU in here in short notice to talk about some of their issues, but those things I think are work-outable. We'll talk about some of the cities and some of the challenges that have been in the news and the Chief's reaction to that coming up. But I mean, the basic premise here is that police departments need to, by necessity, strive for transparency. We need to be able to understand what happens at a traffic stop, in an investigation, some crime scene. At the same time, there are so many accusations that are possible to come at police officers that this thing that they wear, this video camera that they wear, seems to me to be proof for them that they're doing their job well. Correct?
Correct, and I don't want the media or the public or police to think this is the panacea that will cure all. And it's not like the NFL where there's 17 cameras on the sidelines and we get every
You don't get
single
replay either.
you don't get replay. The police officer has one shot in making that decision. So, you know, we deal in very dynamic, fast-moving situations. Situations turn on a dime. So I think it's important for policing. It will help policing in America in that it'll be a vantage point of the police officer start to finish. Oftentimes nowadays, every single call we go on, people are pulling out cell phones and cameras and videotaping. And oftentimes that camera is started when force is starting to be used. I know in fights downtown, when we move in to effect an arrest, I oftentimes see video of the police officers using force. That's never pretty, but it should be important to see the entire event.
Sure. I mean, in fact, amidst this this Charlotte awful story the other night on Broadway, you know, I watched a video that first came online. It was, I think, RI Future put it up, and then the TV stations grabbed it, of, you know, quite the potential melee on Broadway, where police officers were responding to a situation. They find this guy who has a warrant. I'm just trying to recall the story off the top of my head. It was a very volatile situation, and I mentioned on the radio and perhaps on the television the next day that that's a case where you see Providence Police exercising terrific discipline. They're in a physical altercation, unfortunately, with some young people there. Mm-hmm. Yet there are no weapons drawn. They're out there. They're vulnerable. The video's being taken by somebody who obviously is antagonized. But it'd be good to get the other side of the video story, which is, you know, what actually happened before all hell broke loose. And, you know, I was saying, listen, we constantly have to be reminded, with the pendulum beginning to swing against police in terms of the dialogue, that day after day, altercations are minimized. Mm-hmm. Conflicts they subside more than they blow up, or all hell be breaking loose all the time, right?
Correct. And that Broad and Peyton Street situation that you referred to is a perfect example where the camera would aid the police and aid the public in understanding what the police were posed with at that moment.
I'm accused sometimes of giving your profession the benefit of the doubt. Oh well. Do you feel like most people do these days? Or do you feel the tide turning?
I do, and I credit the relationships that we have in the community, and I mean that.
You're speaking specifically to Providence?
To Providence, in that people are reasonable, and I found through my experience, along with the commissioner, with our relationships with leaders of community groups, they give us an opportunity to investigate, uncover the facts, and then report on what may have occurred. And so slow it down, and I think the community leaders have faith and trust in the police department to do that.
Let's talk a little bit about how this body camera thing works. Traffic stops, you know, situations where an arrest is about to happen. Mm-hmm. The mechanics of what would be police enforcement will be on camera, but there are some. This is discretion on the part of the police officer. We need to talk about that a little bit. And then there are situations where the camera should not go on. Correct?
Correct. And
let's take the latter first. When does a camera not go on?
So if you're somebody's making a complaint, it could be sexual in nature, it could be reporting a B&E, a stolen car. They're just making a report. So there's no indication there's a violation, there's a criminal act being committed, about to be committed, or any type of disturbance ready to take place. So
if somebody you're speaking with doesn't appear to be problematic, they can request anonymity and make sure that the camera is off, correct?
Correct. And one of the things that we took note of, and we listened to the people, the stakeholders at the table when they said, we want to make sure that it's in the policy that when someone wants the camera off, that's captured on the video, and that's included in your policy. And both of those things were satisfied in the policy, and that will be a course of action that we capture that on the video. Things like that, we agree.
You want to prove that somebody asked for no camera.
Correct. Now, we certainly, if somebody, if we're downtown on Washington Street on a Friday night and all hell is breaking loose and somebody says, turn that camera off,
yeah,
no,
sorry.
That's not the case.
Right, got it. The discretion that an officer uses, where's the wiggle room? What triggers on and off?
So, what triggers on and off? I mean, I could be.
You pull me over on North Main Street, out of the car.
On. That's mandated on.
On.
So there's only some discretion. There is not broad discretion. I would disagree that there's broad discretion. There's only some. It mandates pretty clearly in the policy when that camera will be on. There is some discretion. If you're out on a routine call and you think everything is under control, you don't have to put it on. Now, could a disturbance or chaos arise? It could, and in the midst of it, you did not activate your camera, and then you'd be called to question how come your camera wasn't on. Those are all things that we're going to have to manage going forward, and we do that on a daily basis with everything that we do. We manage personnel, all in the efforts of learning and retraining and re-educating how to best police in this city.
The ACLU is worried about the discretion part. I'm not sure what they're worried about. We'll ask them, but what's your interpretation?
I would disagree that they're concerned that there's broad discretion. I would say, and I'm willing to say privately and in public, that it's only some discretion, and I think it's for good reason. The Providence Police, when we crafted this policy, we looked at many different agencies who already employed the body-worn camera program, including the NYPD. In New York City had researched, the Office of Inspector General in New York had already reviewed 20 policies by the time he came out with his policy. So we had that luxury of reviewing that policy, and we're consistent with best practices around the country with PERF, the Police Executive Research Forum, which is a think tank out of DC, and the IACP, International Association of Chiefs of Police. Our policy is consistent.
A police officer ends up in a provocative situation a la Tulsa or Charlotte and doesn't have it on, they got big problems.
Big problems.
Huge.
They do, without question.
So I mean it's a professional liability not to keep that thing on more than not.
It is.
Or to follow the protocol that it should be on, period, once you get out of the car.
And I would agree.
Based on the circumstances that could end up in a really provocative or controversial ending.
If you're going to a man with a gun call,
that better
it
be
is
on.
in your best interest to have that camera on.
And the way you said that, I think if I was a police officer, I think I get the meeting. When we come back, we'll talk about Charlotte and how Providence reacts to these tough situations. Stay with us. Back in, and not an unusual scene. Protests here and beyond. Charlotte, your take on the last two nationwide conversations, Tulsa and Charlotte.
So certainly the protests themselves, we've had many protests in the city of Providence and have been commended for the way that we've handled them and reacted to them.
I guess I'm more concerned with the actual shooting incident.
The shootings.
Your take was?
So, you know, I know what you know from watching the news and not much more, and I've always said it's difficult without all of the statements and all of the facts and all of the video footage, but I would say, without question, some of the images and some of the footage that we've seen are disturbing, even to police officers. We speak all the time, and we'll talk the next day after we watch it on national news, like, wow, I mean, I need to know a lot more about that, but that does not look good.
You see that stuff on television, you think to yourself, there, but for the grace of God go I?
Without question. You know, we deal, and I told you offline, more than 1,000 times a year, 3 calls we routinely respond to, man with a gun, shots fired, or a shooting, and our restraint.
3 times a night, or 3 times average per calendar day. 1,000 a year.
More than that. It's just on a Friday or Saturday night, the gun calls are incredible. If it's a hot night and you can sense that, not hot in weather, I mean even in the fall we're extremely busy, but there's a lot of gun activity. We seized with an arrest 140 guns last year, with an arrest, far more guns that we found. And in those 140 arrests, a Providence police officer never fired his weapon once. And now many of those circumstances go well in that the individual gives up, he knows he's illegally possessing a gun. In another portion of them, they run and they dump the gun. And in another portion, they either turn and point or shoot. And we you know, in there, but for the grace of God. And everything is percentages. Now, we've had many, unfortunately, Providence police officers shot in my career. We've had 4 killed in the line of duty in the last 22 years, and that's always a concern.
So when we say there, but for the grace of God, it's multidimensional. You don't want to see anybody hurt in the community. You don't want to see your police officers in a provocative situation that you've got to respond to. You don't want to see your police officers killed. I mean, you've got a whole bunch of that you got to look out for every day. Do you wake up every morning worrying about that aspect of the job, running the department?
I do. That's where I lose sleep about, you know, everyone getting hurt. Gunfire is too prevalent in American society. It really is. It's scary. It's a scary time in America. There's a lot of issues out there surrounding gun violence, and that is the most concerning to me.
Do you ever think of, you know, I look at Charlotte. A black police officer reportedly fired the weapon. The police chief is black. There's a constant undertone of conversation, understandably, in the community from our black leadership. Mm-hmm. It seems, though, that this is evolving into a blue and community conversation as opposed to race at the management end of the police departments, right? I mean, you're a white guy that runs the police department, mm-hmm. very well respected in the community on all sides. My point is that, you know, the racial issue that America is dealing with on so many levels is actually beginning to form about law enforcement's total relationship with the black community and others, not necessarily who's at the helm, right? Mm-hmm. You understand what I'm saying?
I do, and it's true, and that's why we have to work so hard in not only building but maintaining and growing those relationships, because they want to know their police department and the leaders in their police department are accountable, and they have trust in them, and they have faith in their police department. This past weekend we had 6 events in the community on Saturday, and you saw Providence Police everywhere at these events presenting the good name of the patch of the Providence Police in a positive way. That's important in the inner city.
Yeah, they're all over the place, but you're what, 100 short?
Yes.
The academy is coming next year?
Yes, we plan on January that academy will start, and we're looking forward to a 60-person plus Providence Police Department.
Do you ever see a full complement, the likes of which we used to have in the 500 number?
Not since I've been chief, no.
Do you think you see it in the future?
I do. I think there's a commitment on behalf of the leadership of the city to get to that point. Due to the economic situation of the city, that will take some time, but I do see that commitment. It's important.
All right, listen, it's great to have you. Make more stops, will you?
I will.
There's a lot to talk about.
I'm glad we did this.
Hugh Clements, Police Chief in Providence. Final word when we come back. Stay with us. Good to have the Chief of Police on. We will follow up with the ACLU and find out what their concerns are with the body camera for police. But in this day and age, it's almost not only inevitable, but unavoidable, don't you think? Tomorrow night, we'll get right back to kind of a week's end discussion of the presidential race. Jim Arone from Brown University will be here along with Noel Rubinton, journalist extraordinaire. They'll have much to say about this presidential race that we'll all remember for a long time, one way or another, right? We'll see you on the radio at 3 o'clock tomorrow as well on the Dan Yorke Show. Thanks for watching. Good night.